Preface. 23 years ago, I was sitting in my car outside a job interview, my hands trembling so violently I couldn't grip the steering wheel. My heart was pounding so hard I was convinced the interviewer would hear it from across the desk. That morning, I had consumed 3 cups of coffee and spent 2 hours rehearsing answers to questions that might never come. I was drowning in my own thoughts, suffocating under the weight of scenarios that existed only in my mind. That interview changed everything for me, but not in the way you might expect. I got the job, but more importantly, I realized something profound. The enemy wasn't the interview, the potential rejection, or even the uncertainty of my future. The enemy was the war I was waging against my own thoughts. Over the next 2 decades, I dedicated my life to understanding the mechanics of worry and anxiety. I studied under leading psychologists, devoured research from neuroscientists, and worked with thousands of individuals who, like me, had become prisoners of their own minds. What I discovered revolutionized not just my own life, but the lives of countless others who thought they were destined to live in perpetual mental turmoil. The book you're about to experience isn't just another collection of feel-good platitudes or surface-level breathing exercises. This is a comprehensive blueprint for mental freedom, built on decades of scientific research, real-world application, and the stories of ordinary people who achieved extraordinary peace of mind. You're going to learn why your brain creates worry in the first place, how to interrupt the anxiety cycle before it spirals out of control, and most importantly, how to build an unshakable foundation of inner calm that no external circumstance can disturb. By the time we finish this journey together, you'll possess the tools and understanding to not just manage your anxiety, but to eliminate it entirely from your daily experience. This isn't about becoming emotionless or disconnected from reality. This is about reclaiming your birthright to mental clarity, emotional stability, and the kind of deep, lasting peace that transforms how you show up in the world. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Anatomy of Worry. Sarah Chen had built a successful marketing agency from scratch, managed a team of 12 people, and regularly pitched to Fortune 500 companies. Yet every morning, she would wake up at 3 a.m., with her mind racing through an endless catalogue of potential disasters. What if the Johnson account decided to leave? What if her top employee quit? What if the new campaign flopped spectacularly? By the time her alarm clock rang at 6 a.m., Sarah had mentally lived through 17 different catastrophes, none of which had actually occurred. She was exhausted before her day even began. Sarah's story illustrates something I've observed in my decades of research. Worry isn't a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's actually your brain trying to protect you, but using an outdated operating system that's completely inappropriate for modern life. To understand how to stop worrying, we first need to understand what worry actually is and why your brain generates it in the first place. Think of worry as your mind's attempt to solve problems that don't yet exist. It's a mental rehearsal system that evolved when our ancestors faced immediate physical threats like predators or natural disasters. When a caveman heard rustling in the bushes, his brain would immediately start generating scenarios. What if it's a saber-toothed tiger? What if there are multiple predators? What if they've surrounded us? This mental simulation helped him prepare for various possibilities and increased his chances of survival. The problem is, your brain hasn't received the memo that we're no longer living in caves. It's still running the same threat detection software, but now it's being triggered by emails from your boss, conversations with your spouse, and news headlines about events happening thousands of miles away. Modern worry typically follows a predictable pattern that I call the what-if spiral. It begins with a trigger, usually something uncertain or unpredictable in your environment. Your brain detects this uncertainty and immediately labels it as a potential threat. Then it starts generating scenarios, each one building on the last, creating an elaborate mental movie of everything that could go wrong. Here's what makes this pattern so insidious. Your brain can't distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. When you vividly imagine losing your job, your nervous system responds as if you've actually been fired. Your heart rate increases, stress hormones flood your system, and your body prepares for a crisis that exists only in your mind. I learned this firsthand during my early research, when I hooked myself up to biometric monitoring equipment and deliberately engaged in worry thoughts for 10 minutes. The data was startling. My cortisol levels spiked by 40%, my heart rate increased by 25 beats per minute, and my blood pressure rose to levels typically associated with moderate physical exertion. I had essentially put my body through the stress equivalent of running a mile, all while sitting perfectly still in a chair. The neuroscience behind this phenomenon is fascinating. When you worry, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, activates and sends distress signals throughout your body. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of your brain, gets hijacked by this emotional response. This is why it's nearly impossible to think clearly when you're caught in a worry spiral. You're literally experiencing a neurological coup. But here's the crucial insight that changes everything. Worry is not an emotion, it's a behavior. It's something you do, not something that happens to you. This distinction is critical because behaviors can be changed, interrupted, and replaced with more effective alternatives. Most people treat worry like weather, something that happens to them that they must endure. They say things like, "I'm a natural worrier," or "I can't help it, I just worry about everything." But worry is actually a learned response, and what can be learned can be unlearned. The first step in breaking free from chronic worry is recognizing it for what it really is, a mental habit that has outlived its usefulness. Just like any habit, it follows a predictable loop: trigger, routine, reward. The trigger is uncertainty or potential threat. The routine is the mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios. The reward is a false sense of control and preparation. Your brain has been convinced that worrying is useful, even necessary. It believes that by mentally rehearsing disasters, you're somehow preventing them or preparing yourself to handle them better. This is what psychologists call the worry trap, the mistaken belief that worry serves a protective function. In reality, chronic worry does the opposite of what it promises. Instead of preparing you for challenges, it depletes your mental resources. Instead of preventing problems, it often creates them through procrastination, avoidance, and decision paralysis. Instead of keeping you safe, it keeps you stuck in a perpetual state of mental and physical stress that compromises your immune system, disrupts your sleep, and impairs your cognitive function. The good news is that once you understand the mechanics of worry, you can begin to dismantle it systematically. You can learn to recognize the early warning signs of a worry spiral before it gains momentum. You can develop techniques to interrupt the pattern and redirect your mental energy toward more productive activities. Throughout this book, we're going to explore exactly how to do this. But first, you need to accept a fundamental truth. You have far more control over your mental state than you've been led to believe. Your thoughts are not happening to you. They're being generated by you. And what you generate, you can learn to control. This is the beginning of your liberation from the tyranny of worry. In the next chapter, we're going to explore the surprising science of anxiety and discover why your attempts to fight it have been making it stronger. Chapter 2. The Paradox of Control. Marcus Rodriguez was a successful architect who designed skyscrapers that housed thousands of people. He could calculate load-bearing requirements, manage complex construction timelines, and solve engineering problems that stumped his colleagues. But put him on an airplane, and he became a completely different person. The moment Marcus stepped onto a plane, his mind would flood with statistics about mechanical failures, weather-related crashes, and pilot error. He would grip his armrests until his knuckles turned white, monitor every sound the engines made, and spend the entire flight trying to control an experience that was completely outside his influence. Marcus's story perfectly illustrates what I call the control paradox. The harder you try to control your anxiety, the stronger it becomes. This counterintuitive principle is at the heart of why most traditional approaches to anxiety management fail spectacularly. For decades, the prevailing wisdom about anxiety has been to fight it, control it, or manage it. We're told to challenge our anxious thoughts, practice deep breathing, or distract ourselves with positive thinking. While these techniques can provide temporary relief, they're built on a fundamentally flawed premise that anxiety is the enemy that must be defeated. This adversarial approach to anxiety is like trying to stop quicksand from pulling you under by struggling against it. The more you fight, the faster you sink. The more energy you expend trying to control your anxious thoughts, the more powerful they become. I discovered this principle during my work with Emma, a corporate executive who had developed severe social anxiety after a presentation went poorly. Emma had read every self-help book on anxiety, mastered multiple breathing techniques, and could recite positive affirmations like a meditation master. Yet her anxiety continued to intensify. During our sessions, I asked Emma to describe her typical response to anxious thoughts. She explained her elaborate routine. The moment she noticed anxiety arising, she would immediately challenge the thought, replace it with a positive one, and engage in a breathing exercise. She had turned anxiety management into a full-time job. The problem was that this constant vigilance and control-seeking behavior was actually feeding her anxiety. Every time she tried to push away an anxious thought, she was inadvertently giving it more importance and power. Her brain interpreted her frantic efforts to control her thoughts as confirmation that those thoughts represented real danger. This is where the neuroscience gets particularly interesting. When you try to suppress or control an anxious thought, you activate what researchers call the ironic process theory. Your brain assigns additional cognitive resources to monitor whether you're successfully suppressing the unwanted thought. This monitoring process actually increases the likelihood that the thought will return, often with greater intensity. It's like me telling you right now, don't think about a pink elephant. The moment I say those words, what immediately pops into your mind? A pink elephant, of course. Your brain can't process a negative command without first processing the thing you're trying not to think about. The same mechanism applies to anxiety. When you tell yourself don't be anxious, your brain first has to activate the concept of anxiety to understand what it's supposed to avoid. This activation triggers the very state you're trying to prevent. The solution isn't to fight anxiety or try to control it. The solution is to understand it, accept it, and learn to respond to it differently. This approach, which I call anxiety aikido, uses the force and energy of anxiety to your advantage rather than opposing it directly. Anxiety, at its core, is information. It's your nervous system's way of telling you that it has detected something it interprets as a potential threat. Instead of viewing this signal as a malfunction that needs to be fixed, we can learn to view it as data that can inform our response. When you stop fighting anxiety and start listening to it, something remarkable happens. It begins to lose its power over you. Anxiety feeds on resistance and struggle. When you stop providing that resistance, anxiety has nothing to push against, and it naturally begins to dissipate. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up. It means shifting from a control-based approach to a response-based approach. Instead of trying to control whether anxiety shows up, you learn to control how you respond when it does. I teach my clients what I call the RAIN technique for working with anxiety. Recognize, notice when anxiety is present without judgment or resistance. Simply observe it like you would observe clouds in the sky. Accept. Allow the anxiety to exist without trying to change it, fix it, or push it away. This doesn't mean you like it or want it, just that you're willing to let it be there. Investigate. Get curious about the anxiety. What does it feel like in your body? What thoughts are associated with it? What triggered it? Approach it with the curiosity of a scientist, rather than the fear of a victim. Non-attachment. Recognize that the anxiety is a temporary experience passing through your awareness. You are not your anxiety any more than you are a headache or a song stuck in your head. This approach completely transforms your relationship with anxiety. Instead of being something that happens to you, anxiety becomes something you can observe, understand, and respond to skillfully. The key insight here is that you cannot control whether anxious thoughts and feelings arise, but you have complete control over what you do with them once they appear. This shift in focus, from controlling the input to controlling the response, is what separates people who occasionally experience anxiety from people who suffer from chronic anxiety disorders. When Marcus learned this principle, his flying experience transformed completely. Instead of trying to control his anxious thoughts during flights, he learned to acknowledge them, investigate them with curiosity, and then redirect his attention to something more useful. Within 6 months, he was flying regularly for business without any significant distress. The paradox of control reveals a profound truth. The moment you stop trying to control anxiety is the moment you begin to master it. In our next chapter, we're going to explore how to break the cycle of anxious thinking that keeps so many people trapped in mental loops that seem impossible to escape. Chapter 3. Breaking the Thought Loop. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was a brilliant surgeon who could perform complex operations with steady hands and clear thinking under immense pressure. But outside the operating room, she was trapped in what she described as mental prison. Her mind would latch onto a single anxious thought and replay it endlessly, like a broken record that couldn't be turned off. One morning, Jennifer woke up with the thought, "What if I made a mistake during yesterday's surgery?" Within minutes, this single thought had multiplied into dozens of related worries. What if the patient develops complications? What if I damage something I didn't notice? What if my colleagues lose faith in my abilities? What if I lose my medical license? By noon, Jennifer had mentally reviewed the surgery 17 times, researched potential complications online, and convinced herself that her 20-year career was in jeopardy. All of this mental activity was triggered by one unsubstantiated thought that had no basis in reality. Jennifer's experience illustrates one of the most destructive patterns I encounter in my work: the anxious thought loop. This is your mind's tendency to grab onto a worrying thought and replay it obsessively, adding new layers of concern with each repetition until a minor worry becomes a full-blown crisis in your imagination. Understanding how these thought loops form and persist is crucial to breaking free from them. Every thought loop begins with what I call a seed thought, usually something uncertain or potentially negative. Your brain detects this thought and, mistaking mental activity for problem solving, begins to elaborate on it. The neurological process behind this is fascinating. When you have an anxious thought, your brain releases a small amount of stress hormones. These hormones heighten your attention and make you more likely to notice related threatening information. This creates a feedback loop where anxious thoughts generate stress hormones, which make you more sensitive to anxious thoughts, which generate more stress hormones. It's like having a smoke alarm that becomes more sensitive every time it goes off. Eventually, it starts responding to the steam from your morning shower as if it were a 5-alarm fire. The reason these loops are so difficult to break is that they create the illusion of productivity. Your brain convinces you that all this mental activity is useful, that you're analyzing the situation, preparing for contingencies, and solving problems. In reality, you're just spinning your wheels in mental mud, expending enormous amounts of energy while making no forward progress. I learned to recognize thought loops in my own life when I found myself spending hours researching rare diseases after reading a single health article online. What started as casual reading turned into a 3-hour investigation into symptoms I didn't have for conditions that affected fewer than 1 in a million people. My rational mind knew this was ridiculous, but I couldn't seem to stop myself from continuing down the rabbit hole. The key to breaking thought loops lies in understanding the difference between productive thinking and mental rumination. Productive thinking has a clear purpose, a defined endpoint, and leads to actionable insights or decisions. Mental rumination, on the other hand, is circular, repetitive, and leads nowhere except to increased anxiety and mental exhaustion. Here's a simple test to determine whether your thinking is productive or ruminative. Ask yourself, if I continue thinking about this for another hour, will I have any new information or insights? If the answer is no, you're caught in a thought loop. The most effective way to break a thought loop is to interrupt it at the moment you recognize it's happening. This requires developing what I call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking process. You need to become aware that you're thinking anxious thoughts, not just experience the thoughts themselves. I teach my clients a technique called the loop breaker that can interrupt even the most persistent thought spirals. The moment you recognize you're in a loop, you say to yourself, "I notice I'm in a thought loop about specific topic. This thinking is not productive and is not serving me. I'm choosing to redirect my attention now." Then, immediately engage in what I call a pattern interrupt activity. This could be counting backwards from 100 by 7s, naming all the red objects you can see around you, or reciting the alphabet backwards. The specific activity doesn't matter. What matters is that it requires enough mental focus to break the loop's momentum. The reason this works is neurological. Thought loops depend on sustained attention to maintain themselves. When you deliberately redirect your attention to something that requires active concentration, you starve the loop of the mental energy it needs to continue. But here's where most people make a critical mistake. They think the goal is to never have another anxious thought. This is impossible and will only lead to frustration. The goal is to recognize thought loops quickly and interrupt them before they gain momentum. Think of anxious thoughts like hitchhikers on a mental highway. You can't control which hitchhikers appear on the roadside, but you have complete control over whether you pick them up and give them a ride. A single anxious thought isn't a problem. It's when you pick up that thought and drive it around town for 3 hours that it becomes destructive. Jennifer learned to apply this principle with remarkable results. Instead of trying to prevent all anxious thoughts about her surgical performance, she learned to recognize when a single concern was turning into a mental spiral. The moment she caught herself reviewing a procedure for the third or fourth time, she would use the loop breaker technique and immediately engage in a pattern interrupt. Within 2 months, Jennifer's mental rumination decreased by over 80%. She still occasionally had concerns about her work, which is normal and even healthy for someone in her profession, but these concerns no longer hijacked her entire day and compromised her well-being. One of the most powerful insights about thought loops is that they're maintained by what psychologists call experiential avoidance. We get caught in mental loops because we're trying to avoid feeling uncertain, uncomfortable, or out of control. The irony is that this avoidance creates far more discomfort than the original uncertain feeling ever would have. When you learn to tolerate uncertainty and discomfort without immediately rushing to mental analysis, thought loops lose their grip on you. You realize that you can feel anxious without having to figure out exactly why, solve every possible problem, or eliminate all sources of uncertainty from your life. This tolerance for uncertainty is perhaps the most important skill you can develop for long-term anxiety management. In our next chapter, we're going to explore exactly how to build this capacity and why uncertainty might actually be your greatest ally rather than your biggest enemy. Chapter 4. Embracing Uncertainty. Tom Bradley had planned every detail of his wedding day with military precision. He had backup vendors for his backup vendors, detailed timelines laminated and distributed to the wedding party, and contingency plans for 17 different weather scenarios. Yet the night before his wedding, Tom lay awake in bed, his mind racing through an endless list of things that could go wrong. What if the flowers didn't arrive? What if it rained during the outdoor ceremony? What if the band showed up late? What if his future father-in-law gave an embarrassing speech? With each passing hour, Tom's anxiety intensified, and by morning, he was exhausted and barely able to enjoy what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. Tom's story illustrates humanity's complicated relationship with uncertainty. We live in an inherently uncertain world, yet most of us spend enormous amounts of energy trying to create the illusion of certainty and control. This futile struggle against uncertainty is at the root of most anxiety disorders. The human brain has evolved to prefer certainty and predictability. In ancient times, uncertainty often meant danger. Unknown territories might contain predators, unfamiliar foods might be poisonous, and unexpected changes in weather could threaten survival. Our ancestors who were vigilant about uncertainty and motivated to resolve it were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. The problem is that we've inherited this uncertainty avoidance system, but we're now living in a world where uncertainty is not only unavoidable, but often beneficial. Innovation, growth, adventure, and meaningful relationships all require us to step into the unknown and embrace uncertainty rather than fight it. Yet most of us are walking around with what I call uncertainty intolerance, an almost allergic reaction to situations we can't predict or control. This intolerance manifests in various ways: excessive planning, compulsive information seeking, procrastination, avoidance of new experiences, and the mental rumination we discussed in the previous chapter. During my research, I conducted an experiment with 200 volunteers who scored high on anxiety assessments. I presented them with 2 scenarios. Scenario A involved a guaranteed mild discomfort, like receiving a small electric shock in exactly 5 minutes. Scenario B involved a 50% chance of receiving the same shock at some unknown time within the next hour. Remarkably, 71% of participants chose Scenario A, preferring guaranteed discomfort over uncertain discomfort. They would rather experience something unpleasant than tolerate uncertainty about whether and when that unpleasant experience might occur. This preference for certainty, even when that certainty involves guaranteed suffering, explains why so many people remain stuck in unsatisfying jobs, relationships, or life situations. The known discomfort feels safer than the uncertain possibility of something better. But here's what I've discovered through decades of research and practice. Uncertainty isn't the enemy of peace and happiness. It's the prerequisite. Every positive change in your life, every moment of growth, every meaningful achievement has emerged from your willingness to step into uncertainty. Think about the best things that have happened in your life. That job opportunity that came out of nowhere. The relationship that blossomed when you least expected it. The creative project that exceeded your wildest expectations. The adventure that changed your perspective. None of these experiences would have been possible if you had demanded certainty before taking action. Uncertainty is not just unavoidable, it's the source of life's richness and possibility. When you make peace with uncertainty, you don't just reduce anxiety, you open yourself up to opportunities and experiences that certainty seekers miss entirely. Learning to embrace uncertainty requires what I call uncertainty training, a gradual process of building your tolerance for unknown outcomes. Just like physical fitness, uncertainty tolerance can be developed through consistent practice with progressively challenging situations. The first step is recognizing uncertainty for what it really is. Information about the limits of your knowledge, not information about impending danger. When you don't know how something will turn out, that doesn't mean it will turn out badly. It simply means you don't know. And not knowing is a normal, healthy part of the human experience. I teach my clients to reframe uncertainty using what I call the possibility perspective. Instead of viewing uncertainty as a threat to be eliminated, they learn to view it as a space of infinite possibilities, most of which are neutral or positive. When Tom learned this reframe, his entire relationship with his wedding day transformed. Instead of seeing the uncertain elements as potential disasters, he began to see them as opportunities for spontaneous joy and unexpected moments. The flowers arrived late, which gave him extra time for photos with his groomsmen. A brief rain shower moved the ceremony indoors, creating an intimate atmosphere that everyone commented on. His father-in-law's speech was indeed embarrassing, but it became the source of laughter and family stories for years to come. The key insight is that uncertainty doesn't increase the likelihood of negative outcomes, it just increases the range of possible outcomes. Your anxious mind has been trained to focus exclusively on the negative possibilities within that range, but that's a choice, not a requirement. One of the most powerful exercises for building uncertainty tolerance is what I call uncertainty exposure. This involves deliberately putting yourself in low-stakes, uncertain situations and practicing being comfortable with not knowing how things will turn out. You might take a different route to work without checking traffic reports first. You might go to a restaurant and ask the server to recommend something instead of studying the menu for 20 minutes. You might accept a social invitation without knowing exactly who will be there or what the schedule will be. These small acts of uncertainty exposure train your nervous system to remain calm in the face of the unknown. They prove to your anxious brain that uncertainty doesn't automatically lead to catastrophe, and they build your confidence in your ability to handle whatever unfolds. Another crucial aspect of embracing uncertainty is learning to distinguish between productive and unproductive responses to uncertain situations. Productive responses involve taking reasonable actions based on available information. Unproductive responses involve mental rumination, excessive information seeking, or avoidance. If you're uncertain about your job security, a productive response might be updating your resume and networking within your industry. An unproductive response would be spending hours researching worst-case economic scenarios or avoiding the topic entirely. The goal isn't to become reckless or stop planning for the future. The goal is to plan appropriately without becoming enslaved by the need for certainty. You can prepare for likely scenarios without exhausting yourself trying to prepare for every possible scenario. Perhaps the most transformative aspect of embracing uncertainty is the recognition that your ability to handle uncertain situations is far greater than you imagine. You've been navigating uncertainty successfully your entire life. You've survived job changes, relationship challenges, health scares, financial pressures, and countless other uncertain situations. Your track record for getting through uncertain times is 100%. Every challenge you've faced, every uncertain situation you've encountered, every problem that seemed insurmountable at the time, you've found a way through. This isn't luck or coincidence, it's evidence of your fundamental resilience and adaptability. When you truly internalize this truth, uncertainty stops being something to fear and becomes something to trust. You begin to see uncertain situations, not as tests you might fail, but as opportunities to once again demonstrate your capability and resourcefulness. In our next chapter, we're going to explore how your physical body plays a crucial role in anxiety and how learning to work with your body's signals can dramatically reduce anxious thoughts and feelings. Chapter 5. The Body-Mind Connection. Rachel Martinez was a successful therapist who helped her clients overcome anxiety and depression. She understood the psychology of worry better than most, could identify cognitive distortions instantly, and had mastered every therapeutic technique in her professional arsenal. Yet she struggled with her own anxiety attacks, which would strike without warning and leave her feeling helpless despite all her psychological knowledge. One day, during a particularly intense anxiety episode, Rachel noticed something interesting. Her symptoms weren't starting in her mind, they were starting in her body. First came the subtle tightening in her chest, then the slight increase in her heart rate, and only then did the anxious thoughts begin flooding in. This observation led to a breakthrough that changed how she understood and treated anxiety forever. Rachel's discovery aligns with revolutionary research in neuroscience that's transforming how we understand the relationship between body and mind. For decades, we've treated anxiety as a mental problem that happens to have physical symptoms. But cutting-edge research suggests the opposite might be true. Anxiety might be primarily a physical phenomenon that creates mental symptoms. Your body is constantly sending information to your brain about your internal state through a process called interoception. This includes data about your heart rate, breathing patterns, muscle tension, gut sensations, and hundreds of other physiological processes. Your brain interprets this information and creates your emotional experience based on what it perceives is happening in your body. This is why anxiety often feels like it comes out of nowhere. Your conscious mind might be perfectly calm, but if your body is sending stress signals to your brain, you'll experience anxiety regardless of your mental state. The anxious thoughts that follow are often your mind's attempt to make sense of the physical sensations it's experiencing. During my early research, I discovered this phenomenon firsthand when I started tracking my own anxiety patterns. I noticed that my most intense anxious episodes were preceded by specific physical changes: shallow breathing, tension in my shoulders, and a slight increase in my heart rate. These changes occurred minutes before any anxious thoughts entered my consciousness. This discovery was both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it revealed how little control my rational mind actually had over my emotional state. Empowering because it showed me that I could influence my anxiety by working with my body, rather than just battling with my thoughts. The human nervous system operates through two primary branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which activates your stress response, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which activates your relaxation response. Anxiety occurs when your sympathetic nervous system becomes chronically activated, keeping your body in a state of constant alert even when there's no actual danger present. Most people with chronic anxiety are living in a state of sympathetic dominance, where their nervous system has become stuck in fight or flight mode. Their bodies are producing stress hormones, maintaining muscle tension, and operating at high alert levels throughout the day. This physical state of arousal then creates the mental experience of anxiety, worry, and restlessness. The good news is that you can learn to directly influence your nervous system through specific body-based practices. Unlike your thoughts, which can be slippery and difficult to control, your body responds predictably to certain interventions. One of the most powerful tools for nervous system regulation is conscious breathing. Your breath is unique among physiological processes because it operates both automatically. You don't have to think about breathing to stay alive, but you can consciously alter your breathing patterns to influence your nervous system state. When you're anxious, your breathing typically becomes shallow and rapid, centered in your chest rather than your belly. This breathing pattern sends danger signals to your brain, which responds by increasing your anxiety. But when you consciously shift to slow, deep, diaphragmatic breathing, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system and signal to your brain that you're safe. I teach my clients a technique called 4-7-8 breathing that can shift your nervous system from sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic activation in just a few minutes. You breathe in for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 7, and exhale for a count of 8. The extended exhale is crucial because it stimulates the vagus nerve, which triggers the relaxation response. But breathing is just one way to work with your body's anxiety signals. Progressive muscle relaxation can help you identify and release tension you might not even realize you're carrying. Regular physical exercise helps metabolize stress hormones and builds resilience against anxiety. Even simple practices like taking warm baths or spending time in nature can shift your nervous system state. Rachel learned to apply these principles by becoming a detective of her own physical sensations. Instead of waiting for anxiety attacks to overwhelm her, she learned to notice the subtle early warning signs her body was sending. The moment she detected tension in her shoulders or noticed her breathing becoming shallow, she would immediately implement body-based interventions to prevent the anxiety from escalating. Within 3 months, Rachel's anxiety attacks decreased by 90%. More importantly, she developed confidence in her ability to influence her emotional state through body awareness and physical practices. She had learned to work with her body as an ally, rather than experiencing it as an enemy. One of the most important insights about the body-mind connection is that emotional regulation happens from the bottom up, not the top down. You can't think your way out of an activated nervous system, but you can breathe, move, and relax your way out of one. This doesn't mean that thoughts and beliefs are irrelevant to anxiety management. Mental strategies are crucial for long-term change. But in moments of acute anxiety, when your nervous system is highly activated, body-based interventions are often more effective than cognitive techniques. I've also discovered that many people with chronic anxiety have lost touch with their body's natural signals. They've become so focused on their thoughts and mental content that they're barely aware of their physical experience. Learning to tune back into your body's wisdom is essential for lasting anxiety relief. Your body has an innate capacity for self-regulation and healing. When you learn to listen to its signals and respond appropriately, it becomes your most powerful ally in overcoming anxiety. Every sensation your body produces is information you can use to better understand and manage your emotional state. In our next chapter, we're going to explore one of the most counterintuitive aspects of anxiety recovery: why facing your fears rather than avoiding them is the key to lasting freedom from anxiety. Chapter 6: The Courage to Face Fear. Michael Thompson was a talented photographer whose career was flourishing until he developed an intense fear of driving after witnessing a serious car accident. What started as reasonable caution gradually evolved into complete avoidance. Michael stopped driving on highways, then avoided busy streets, then stopped driving altogether. Within 6 months, his world had shrunk to a few blocks around his apartment, accessible only by walking or public transportation. Michael's story illustrates one of the most destructive patterns in anxiety management: the avoidance trap. When we encounter something that makes us anxious, our natural instinct is to avoid it. This avoidance provides immediate relief, which reinforces the behavior and makes it more likely we'll avoid similar situations in the future. Over time, this pattern of avoidance can severely restrict our lives and actually increase our overall anxiety levels. The relationship between avoidance and anxiety is one of the most misunderstood aspects of mental health. Most people believe that avoiding anxiety-provoking situations is a reasonable form of self-care. In reality, avoidance is like taking out a high-interest loan from your future self. The temporary relief you experience now comes at the cost of increased anxiety and decreased confidence later. Every time you avoid something because it makes you anxious, you send a powerful message to your brain: this situation is dangerous and I'm not capable of handling it. Your brain, which is designed to keep you safe, takes this message seriously and becomes even more vigilant about protecting you from similar situations in the future. This creates what psychologists call anxiety sensitization, where your fear response becomes increasingly sensitive to potential threats. Situations that once caused mild discomfort start triggering intense anxiety. Your world gradually becomes smaller as more and more experiences get classified as too dangerous to face. I learned about the devastating effects of avoidance during my work with Elena, a brilliant engineer who developed a fear of public speaking after stumbling over a presentation early in her career. Instead of facing her fear, Elena began declining speaking opportunities, avoiding team meetings where she might be called upon, and eventually turning down promotions that would require public presentation skills. By the time Elena came to see me, she hadn't spoken publicly in over 2 years. Her career had stagnated, her confidence had plummeted, and her fear of public speaking had generalized to include any situation where she might be the center of attention. The solution to the avoidance trap isn't to suddenly throw yourself into the deep end of your worst fears. That approach, which I call flooding, can actually make anxiety worse by overwhelming your nervous system. Instead, the most effective approach is what psychologists call graduated exposure, a systematic process of gradually facing your fears in manageable steps. The principle behind exposure therapy is elegantly simple. When you face a feared situation and nothing catastrophic happens, your brain updates its threat assessment. Each successful exposure weakens the anxiety response and builds evidence that you're more capable than your fears suggest. But here's what most people don't understand about exposure. The goal isn't to eliminate fear entirely. The goal is to prove to yourself that you can handle fear. Some degree of nervousness before public speaking, job interviews, or first dates is completely normal and even beneficial. The problem occurs when fear becomes so intense that it prevents you from engaging in meaningful activities. I worked with Elena to create what we called her Courage Ladder, a series of increasingly challenging speaking situations arranged from least to most anxiety-provoking. We started with her speaking to herself in a mirror for 2 minutes. Then she progressed to recording herself giving a short presentation on her phone. Next, she practiced speaking in front of one trusted friend, then a small group of colleagues, and eventually worked up to presenting at team meetings. Each step on the ladder was designed to be challenging but manageable. Elena would stay at each level until her anxiety decreased by at least 50% before moving to the next step. This process took 4 months, but by the end, Elena was not only comfortable speaking in professional settings, she had actually volunteered to give a presentation at an industry conference. The key to successful exposure is understanding what I call the anxiety curve. When you first encounter a feared situation, your anxiety will spike. This is normal and expected, but if you stay in the situation without fleeing, your anxiety will naturally begin to decrease. This decrease happens because your nervous system cannot maintain peak arousal indefinitely, and because you begin to gather evidence that the situation isn't as dangerous as your fear predicted. Most people make the mistake of leaving anxiety-provoking situations right at the peak of their discomfort, which actually reinforces their fear. They never give themselves the opportunity to experience the natural decrease in anxiety that would occur if they stayed with the discomfort a little longer. This is why the timing of exposure is crucial. You need to stay in the feared situation long enough for your anxiety to decrease by at least 30% from its peak. This teaches your brain that the situation is manageable and that you have the resources to cope with discomfort. Michael, the photographer with driving anxiety, learned this principle through careful exposure work. We started with him sitting in his car, in his driveway, with the engine off, then with the engine running, then driving to the end of his block. Gradually, over several months, he worked up to driving on increasingly busy streets and eventually returned to highway driving. The transformation wasn't just about driving. As Michael faced his fear systematically, his overall confidence increased. He started taking on photography assignments he had been avoiding, began dating again, and even planned a cross-country road trip to photograph national parks. One of the most important aspects of exposure work is learning to distinguish between discomfort and danger. Your anxious mind will try to convince you that feeling uncomfortable means you're in danger, but this is rarely true. Discomfort is simply information that you're stepping outside your comfort zone, which is exactly where growth occurs. I teach my clients to develop what I call discomfort tolerance, the ability to experience unpleasant sensations without immediately trying to escape them. This skill is invaluable not just for anxiety management, but for achieving any meaningful goal in life. Every worthwhile achievement requires you to be uncomfortable at some point. The beautiful thing about facing your fears systematically is that success builds on success. Each exposure experience increases your confidence and resilience, making the next challenge feel more manageable. You begin to see yourself as someone who can handle difficult situations, rather than someone who needs to be protected from them. Perhaps most importantly, you discover that your fears are almost always worse than the reality they represent. The anticipation of giving a presentation is usually far more distressing than actually giving the presentation. The imagination of a difficult conversation is typically more painful than having the actual conversation. This realization is profoundly liberating. When you understand that your fears are often false alarms, you can learn to question them rather than automatically obey them. You can ask yourself, is this fear based on actual danger, or is it based on my imagination of what might happen? In our next chapter, we're going to explore how to build unshakable inner peace by developing what I call your calm core, a stable center of tranquility that external circumstances cannot disturb. Chapter 7. Building your calm core. David Kim was a paramedic who dealt with life and death emergencies on a daily basis. At work, he was known for his steady nerves and clear thinking under pressure. But at home, he would lie awake worrying about bills, his children's futures, and whether his wife still found him attractive. The same man who could remain calm while performing CPR would become anxious about whether he'd remembered to lock the front door. David's paradox illustrates something fascinating about human psychology. External calm and internal peace are completely different skills. You can appear composed on the outside while experiencing chaos on the inside, or you can maintain inner tranquility even in the midst of external turbulence. Most anxiety management strategies focus on controlling external circumstances or managing symptoms when they arise. But true freedom from anxiety comes from developing what I call your calm core, a stable foundation of inner peace that remains undisturbed regardless of what's happening around you. Your calm core isn't about feeling relaxed all the time or never experiencing stress. It's about developing an unshakable center of stability that you can access regardless of external circumstances. It's the difference between being a small boat tossed about by every wave and being a deep-rooted tree that bends with the wind but never breaks. The foundation of building your calm core lies in understanding the difference between your essential self and your temporary experiences. You are not your thoughts, emotions, or circumstances. You are the awareness that observes these experiences. This might sound philosophical, but it has profound practical implications for anxiety management. When you identify completely with your anxious thoughts and feelings, you become trapped by them. But when you recognize that you are the observer of these experiences rather than the experiences themselves, you create space between yourself and your anxiety. This space is where your freedom lies. I discovered this principle during a meditation retreat early in my career. For 3 days, I sat in silence, observing my thoughts and emotions without judgment or interference. What struck me most powerfully was the recognition that there was a part of me that remained calm and stable, even when my thoughts were chaotic and my emotions were intense. This stable awareness wasn't something I had to create or manufacture. It was already there, like a clear sky that's always present, even when covered by clouds. The clouds of thoughts and emotions would come and go, but the sky of awareness remained constant and undisturbed. This realization transformed my approach to anxiety management. Instead of trying to control or eliminate anxious thoughts and feelings, I learned to rest in the awareness that observes them. This awareness is naturally peaceful, spacious, and untroubled by the content of experience. Building your calm core requires developing what contemplative traditions call witness consciousness, the ability to observe your experiences without getting lost in them. This isn't about becoming detached or emotionally numb. It's about maintaining perspective and remembering your essential nature even when experiencing challenging emotions. One of the most effective practices for developing witness consciousness is mindfulness meditation. Despite its growing popularity, meditation is widely misunderstood. Most people think the goal is to stop thinking or achieve a perpetually blissful state. In reality, meditation is simply the practice of observing whatever is present in your experience, without trying to change it. When you meditate regularly, you begin to notice that thoughts and emotions are temporary visitors in the space of your awareness. They arise, exist for a period of time, and then dissolve naturally. You learn that you don't have to engage with every thought that appears or act on every emotion you feel. This recognition is enormously liberating. You realize that anxiety is something you experience, not something you are. You can feel anxious without being an anxious person. You can have worried thoughts without being a worrier. This shift in identity is crucial for lasting change. David learned to apply this principle by developing what we called his daily sanctuary practice. Every morning, before checking his phone or engaging with the demands of his day, David would spend 15 minutes in silent meditation, simply observing whatever thoughts, emotions, or sensations arose in his awareness. This practice didn't eliminate David's capacity to feel anxious, but it fundamentally changed his relationship with anxiety. Instead of being overwhelmed by worried thoughts about his family's future, he could observe these thoughts with compassion and perspective. He learned to respond to challenges from his calm core rather than reacting from his anxious thoughts. Within 6 months, David's wife commented that he seemed like a different person. He was more present with his family, less reactive to daily stresses, and more capable of maintaining perspective during difficult situations. His external circumstances hadn't changed dramatically, but his internal experience had transformed completely. Building your calm core also requires what I call perspective practices. activities that remind you of your place in the larger context of existence. When you're caught up in anxious thoughts about deadlines, relationships, or finances, these concerns can feel all-consuming. But when you step back and consider the vast scope of time and space, most of our daily worries reveal themselves as relatively minor disturbances. I encourage my clients to regularly engage in activities that cultivate this broader perspective. Spending time in nature, contemplating the night sky, reading about history, or studying astronomy can all help you remember that your current concerns, while valid, are temporary blips in the vast unfolding of existence. This isn't about minimizing your problems or pretending they don't matter. It's about maintaining appropriate proportion and not allowing temporary challenges to disturb your essential peace. Your calm core understands that difficult situations are part of life's natural rhythm, not personal catastrophes that require panic or despair. Another crucial aspect of building your calm core is learning to trust the process of life itself. Much of our anxiety stems from the belief that we need to control outcomes to be safe and happy. But life has its own intelligence and flow that often surpasses our limited understanding and planning. When you develop trust in life's process, you can engage fully with your responsibilities and goals while remaining unattached to specific outcomes. You do your best and then surrender the results to forces beyond your control. This surrender isn't passive resignation, it's active engagement combined with wise acceptance. Perhaps the most profound aspect of developing your calm core is the recognition that peace is your natural state. Anxiety, worry, and stress are disturbances in this natural peace, not evidence that peace is unavailable to you. Just as a lake's surface naturally returns to stillness when the wind stops blowing, your mind naturally returns to peace when you stop stirring it up with anxious thoughts. This understanding changes everything. Instead of seeing anxiety as proof that something is wrong with you, you begin to see it as a temporary disturbance in your natural state of calm. Instead of fighting anxiety, you learn to wait patiently for it to settle, trusting in your inherent capacity for peace. In our next chapter, we're going to explore how to maintain your progress and prevent relapse by building sustainable practices that support long-term mental freedom. Chapter 8: Sustainable Mental Freedom. Dr. Amanda Foster had overcome severe panic disorder using every technique in this book. For 2 years, she lived virtually anxiety-free, building a successful consulting practice and enjoying the kind of mental clarity she had never experienced before. Then her father was diagnosed with cancer, her marriage hit a rough patch, and work stress intensified simultaneously. Within 3 weeks, Amanda found herself back in the grip of anxiety, convinced that all her progress had been lost. Amanda's experience illustrates one of the most important, but often overlooked aspects of anxiety recovery: the difference between temporary improvement and sustainable transformation. Many people make significant progress in managing their anxiety, only to experience setbacks when life presents new challenges. They interpret these setbacks as failures, rather than recognizing them as natural parts of the growth process. True mental freedom isn't about never experiencing anxiety again. It's about developing resilience, recovering quickly when anxiety does arise, and maintaining your core practices even during difficult periods. It's about building a sustainable lifestyle that supports mental well-being rather than depending on perfect circumstances to feel okay. During my 2 decades of research and practice, I've identified several key factors that determine whether someone maintains their progress or experiences significant relapse. The most important factor is what I call practice consistency. People who maintain regular mental health practices, even when they feel good, tend to navigate challenges much more successfully than those who abandon their practices once their symptoms improve. Think of anxiety management like physical fitness. You wouldn't expect to stay in excellent physical condition if you stopped exercising the moment you reached your fitness goals. Similarly, mental fitness requires ongoing maintenance practices that keep your psychological muscles strong and resilient. The challenge is that when anxiety decreases, motivation to continue practices often decreases as well. This is completely understandable, but ultimately counterproductive. The time when you feel least motivated to meditate, practice breathing exercises, or engage in exposure work is often when these practices are most important. I learned this lesson personally when I experienced my own significant setback about 5 years into my anxiety recovery journey. I had been doing so well that I gradually stopped meditating regularly, abandoned my exercise routine, and began neglecting the body awareness practices that had been crucial to my initial healing. When a series of stressful events occurred simultaneously, I was unprepared and experienced a level of anxiety I hadn't felt in years. This experience taught me that sustainable mental freedom requires what I call prosperity practices, the habits and routines you maintain not because you need them desperately, but because they keep you strong and resilient for whatever challenges life might present. The most effective prosperity practices are those that integrate seamlessly into your daily routine rather than requiring significant additional time commitments. A 5-minute morning meditation is more sustainable than an hour-long session you can only manage occasionally. A daily 10-minute walk is more valuable than weekend hiking trips you do sporadically. Amanda learned to rebuild her resilience by focusing on what I call the Big Three sustainability practices: daily meditation, regular physical activity, and consistent sleep hygiene. She started with just 5 minutes of meditation each morning, a 15-minute walk during lunch, and a commitment to being in bed by 10 p.m. each night. These might seem like modest changes, but their cumulative effect was profound. Within 2 months, Amanda's baseline anxiety had decreased significantly, her energy levels improved, and most importantly, she felt confident in her ability to handle future challenges without losing her mental equilibrium. Another crucial aspect of sustainable mental freedom is developing what I call challenge immunity. This doesn't mean becoming immune to all stress or difficulty, but rather developing the confidence that you can handle whatever life presents without losing your essential well-being. Challenge immunity comes from repeatedly proving to yourself that you can navigate difficult situations successfully. Each time you face a challenge and come through it intact, you build evidence of your own resilience and capability. Over time, this evidence becomes stronger than your fears about what might happen in the future. One of the most effective ways to build challenge immunity is through what I call stress inoculation, deliberately exposing yourself to manageable challenges that build your confidence and coping skills. This might involve taking on a new project at work, having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding, or trying a new activity that pushes you outside your comfort zone. The key is to choose challenges that stretch your capabilities without overwhelming your resources. Just as vaccines expose you to weakened versions of diseases to build immunity, stress inoculation exposes you to manageable difficulties to build psychological resilience. I also emphasize the importance of what I call recovery rituals, specific practices you can implement when you notice your anxiety levels beginning to increase. These aren't emergency interventions for full-blown panic attacks, but rather early intervention strategies that prevent minor stress from escalating into major anxiety. Your recovery ritual might include things like taking 3 conscious breaths, going for a short walk, calling a supportive friend, or engaging in a brief meditation. The specific activities matter less than having a predetermined plan you can implement consistently whenever you notice anxiety beginning to arise. Perhaps the most important element of sustainable mental freedom is maintaining what I call growth mindset about your anxiety journey. People with fixed mindsets view setbacks as evidence of their limitations or failures. People with growth mindsets view setbacks as information about what they need to adjust or strengthen in their approach. When Amanda initially experienced her anxiety returning, she interpreted it as proof that she was fundamentally flawed and would never truly overcome her anxiety. This interpretation created additional anxiety and shame that made her original symptoms worse. When she learned to view her setback as valuable feedback about the importance of consistent practices, her entire relationship with the experience changed. Setbacks become opportunities for deeper learning and stronger recovery when you approach them with curiosity rather than self-judgment. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me again?" you learn to ask, "What is this experience teaching me about what I need to strengthen or adjust in my approach?" This shift in perspective transforms setbacks from evidence of failure into stepping stones toward greater resilience and understanding. You begin to see challenges as opportunities to practice your skills rather than threats to your well-being. Sustainable mental freedom also requires building what I call your support ecosystem, the relationships, resources, and environments that reinforce your mental health practices and provide assistance during challenging times. This might include friends who share your commitment to personal growth, healthcare providers who understand your approach to anxiety management, and physical environments that support your well-being. Many people try to overcome anxiety in isolation, but sustainable change almost always involves community support and accountability. Having people in your life who understand your journey and can offer encouragement during difficult times makes an enormous difference in maintaining long-term progress. The ultimate goal of sustainable mental freedom is reaching what I call anxiety indifference, a state where anxiety occasionally arises but doesn't significantly impact your choices, behaviors, or overall well-being. You neither seek out anxiety nor avoid it. It becomes like weather, something you notice and respond to appropriately without it controlling your life. This indifference isn't numbness or detachment. It's the natural result of having faced your fears, developed your coping skills, and built unshakable confidence in your ability to handle whatever life presents. Anxiety becomes just another temporary experience in the vast landscape of human emotion, no more significant than feeling hungry, tired, or excited. In our final chapter, we're going to integrate everything you've learned into a comprehensive action plan that you can begin implementing immediately to start your journey toward lasting mental freedom. Chapter 9. Your Personal Freedom Plan. Lisa Chen sat in her car outside our clinic, reading through the notes she had taken during our 8 previous sessions. 6 months earlier, she had been barely functional, spending most of her days paralyzed by worry about her health, her relationships, and her career. Now she was about to start a new job that excited rather than terrified her, had rekindled her marriage, and hadn't had a panic attack in over 2 months. But Lisa was nervous about something else: maintaining her progress without weekly therapy sessions. She had become dependent on our conversations for reassurance and guidance, and the thought of managing her mental health independently felt overwhelming. This concern led to one of the most important insights of her entire recovery journey. Lisa's anxiety about managing her own anxiety was actually the final frontier of her healing process. True mental freedom isn't just about eliminating anxious thoughts and feelings. It's about developing unshakable confidence in your own ability to navigate whatever psychological challenges arise. It's about graduating from being a patient who needs treatment to being your own most trusted therapist and guide. This transition requires what I call your personal freedom plan, a comprehensive but practical approach to maintaining and deepening your mental wellness that doesn't depend on external support or perfect circumstances. Your plan needs to be personalized to your specific situation, sustainable over the long term, and flexible enough to adapt as your life changes. After working with thousands of individuals over the past 2 decades, I've identified 5 essential components that every effective personal freedom plan must include. Think of these as the pillars that support your ongoing mental freedom, each one important but working synergistically with the others. Pillar 1. Daily Foundation Practices. Your daily foundation practices are the non-negotiable habits that maintain your baseline mental health regardless of external circumstances. These practices serve the same function as brushing your teeth or eating meals. They're basic maintenance activities that prevent problems before they start. Based on everything we've covered in this book, your daily foundation should include a minimum of 5 minutes of mindfulness or meditation practice, some form of physical movement that you genuinely enjoy, and at least one conscious breathing exercise. These might seem simple, but their cumulative effect over time is extraordinary. Lisa's daily foundation consisted of a 10-minute morning meditation, using a guided app, a 20-minute walk during her lunch break, and 3 minutes of deep breathing before bed. She chose these specific practices because they fit naturally into her existing routine and didn't require special equipment or ideal circumstances. The key to sustainable daily practices is starting smaller than you think necessary and building consistency before increasing intensity. It's better to meditate for 5 minutes every day than to meditate for an hour once a week. Consistency creates neural pathways and habits that become automatic over time. Pillar 2. Weekly Challenge Practice. Your weekly challenge practice involves deliberately engaging with situations that stretch your comfort zone and build your confidence in handling uncertainty and discomfort. This practice prevents your world from shrinking back to only situations that feel completely safe and predictable. Your weekly challenge doesn't need to be dramatic or terrifying. It might involve having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding, trying a new restaurant without reading reviews first, or attending a social event where you don't know many people. The goal is to regularly prove to yourself that you can handle uncertain and potentially uncomfortable situations. Lisa's weekly challenges evolved over time. Initially, she would practice making phone calls for work appointments instead of sending emails. Later, she challenged herself to speak up in meetings when she had ideas to contribute. Eventually, She was volunteering for presentations and leadership opportunities that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. These weekly exposures serve as anxiety insurance, maintaining your tolerance for discomfort and preventing the avoidance patterns that can gradually restrict your life. They keep your courage muscles strong and flexible. Pillar 3. Monthly assessment and adjustment. Your monthly assessment involves honestly evaluating your progress, identifying areas where you might be sliding back into old patterns, and adjusting your approach as needed. This prevents small problems from becoming big problems and ensures your practices remain relevant to your current life situation. During your monthly assessment, ask yourself, are my daily practices still serving me, or do they need adjustment? Have I been avoiding anything important due to anxiety? What challenges am I facing that might require additional support or new strategies? What victories can I celebrate from the past month? This assessment isn't about harsh self-criticism or perfectionism. It's about honest self-reflection and course correction, like a pilot checking instruments and adjusting the flight path as needed. Sometimes you'll discover you need to intensify certain practices. Sometimes you'll realize you can ease up in areas where you've built strong resilience. Pillar 4. Emergency protocol. Your emergency protocol is your predetermined plan for handling periods when anxiety spikes unexpectedly or life presents particularly challenging circumstances. Having this plan in place prevents you from feeling helpless during difficult times and provides clear steps to follow when your thinking might be compromised by stress. Your emergency protocol should include immediate anxiety reduction techniques you can use anywhere, a list of supportive people you can contact for perspective and encouragement, and professional resources you can access if needed. Most importantly, it should include reminders about temporary nature of difficult periods and your track record of successfully navigating previous challenges. Lisa's emergency protocol included her 4-7-8 breathing technique, a walk outside if possible, a call to her sister or best friend, and a written reminder she kept in her phone that said, "This feeling is temporary. You have survived 100% of your difficult days so far. You have the tools and strength to handle this situation." Pillar 5. Growth and learning plan. Your growth and learning plan involves continuing to develop your understanding of anxiety, mental health, and personal development. This prevents stagnation and ensures you continue building resilience and wisdom over time. This might involve reading books related to psychology and personal development, attending workshops or seminars, listening to podcasts about mental health, or even pursuing formal education in areas that interest you. The specific content matters less than maintaining a learner's mindset and continuing to invest in your psychological development. Lisa developed a habit of reading one personal development book per month and listening to psychology podcasts during her commute. She also joined a meditation group at a local community center, which provided both continued learning and social connection with people who shared her values around mental wellness. Implementing your personal freedom plan. The key to successfully implementing your personal freedom plan is to start with the minimum effective dose and build gradually. Choose one practice from each pillar and commit to maintaining those 5 practices for 30 days before adding anything new. Remember that perfection is the enemy of progress. You don't need to execute your plan flawlessly to benefit from it. Missing a day of meditation or avoiding a weekly challenge occasionally doesn't invalidate your entire approach. The goal is consistent effort over time, not perfect adherence to an ideal schedule. It's also important to customize your plan based on your unique situation, preferences, and lifestyle. A plan that works for a single person in their 20s might not work for a parent of young children or someone dealing with chronic health issues. The principles remain the same, but the specific practices should fit your reality. Beyond symptom management. As you implement your personal freedom plan, you'll likely notice that your relationship with anxiety continues to evolve. What began as desperate attempts to eliminate anxious feelings transforms into a comprehensive approach to living with greater courage, authenticity, and resilience. Many of my clients discover that their anxiety journey becomes a catalyst for positive changes that extend far beyond mental health. They become more decisive, more willing to take calculated risks, more present in their relationships, and more aligned with their authentic values and desires. Lisa exemplified this transformation. What started as a desperate desire to stop having panic attacks evolved into a complete lifestyle change that included career advancement, improved relationships, better physical health, and a deep sense of personal empowerment she had never experienced before. Your personal freedom plan isn't just about managing anxiety. It's about creating the conditions for a rich, meaningful, and courageous life. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle uncertainty with grace, face challenges with confidence, and pursue your dreams despite the inevitable presence of fear and doubt. In our conclusion, we're going to solidify your understanding and commitment by reviewing the key principles that will guide you on this journey and providing you with a clear next steps action plan to begin immediately. Conclusion. Your journey to mental freedom begins now. 3 years ago, I received an email that changed how I think about the work we've been exploring together in this book. It was from David, one of my former clients, who had initially come to me with severe generalized anxiety disorder that had prevented him from traveling, changing jobs, or even dating for over 5 years. David's email contained a photo of himself standing on a mountain peak in Peru, arms raised in victory, with the biggest smile I had ever seen. He had not only completed a challenging solo trek through the Andes, but had also started his own business, gotten married, and was expecting his first child. The man in that photo bore little resemblance to the anxious, withdrawn person I had first met years earlier. But what struck me most about David's message wasn't the dramatic external changes in his life. It was a single sentence that captured the essence of true mental freedom. I still feel afraid sometimes, but fear no longer makes my decisions for me. This distinction is crucial to understand as you embark on your own journey to mental freedom. The goal isn't to become a person who never experiences anxiety, worry, or fear. The goal is to become a person for whom these experiences are temporary visitors rather than permanent residents, passing weather rather than constant climate. Throughout this book, we've explored 9 fundamental principles that form the foundation of lasting anxiety recovery. Let me summarize these principles so you can reference them whenever you need encouragement or direction. Principle 1. Worry is a behavior, not a destiny. You learned that chronic worry isn't a character trait or genetic sentence, but a learned behavior that can be unlearned. Your brain's attempt to protect you through constant threat scanning has become counterproductive in modern life, but this same neuroplasticity that created your anxiety patterns can be harnessed to create new patterns of calm and resilience. Principle 2. Control is an illusion. Response is a choice. We discovered that trying to control anxiety directly only strengthens it, while learning to respond skillfully to anxiety transforms your entire relationship with it. You cannot control whether anxious thoughts arise, but you have complete control over what you do with them once they appear. Principle 3. Thought loops can be interrupted. You learn to recognize the difference between productive thinking and destructive rumination and develop specific techniques to break thought loops before they gain momentum. Mental rumination is not problem-solving. It's a compulsive behavior that depletes your resources while providing no actual solutions. Principle 4. Uncertainty is opportunity, not threat. We explored how your discomfort with uncertainty is at the root of most anxiety, and how learning to embrace uncertainty as the source of life's possibilities rather than dangers transforms your entire approach to challenging situations. Principle 5. Your body is your ally. You discovered that anxiety is often a physical phenomenon that creates mental symptoms, not the other way around. Learning to work with your nervous system through breathing, movement, and body awareness gives you direct access to influencing your emotional state. Principle 6. Courage is built through action. We learned that avoiding anxiety-provoking situations provides temporary relief at the cost of long-term freedom, while systematically facing your fears in manageable steps builds unshakable confidence and expands your world. Principle 7. Peace is your natural state. You explored the concept of developing a calm core, a stable center of tranquility that external circumstances cannot disturb. This calm core isn't something you create, it's something you uncover by learning to rest in your essential nature as the observer of experiences rather than being lost in them. Principle 8. Progress requires maintenance. We discovered that sustainable mental freedom requires ongoing practices and lifestyle choices that support your well-being, not just crisis intervention when problems arise. Mental fitness, like physical fitness, requires consistent maintenance to remain strong. Principle 9. You are your own best therapist. Finally, you learn to develop confidence in your ability to navigate psychological challenges independently through a comprehensive personal freedom plan that addresses daily practices, weekly challenges, monthly assessments, emergency protocols, and ongoing growth. Your next steps action plan. Knowledge without action remains merely interesting information. To transform these principles into lasting change in your life, you need to begin implementing them immediately. Here's your step-by-step action plan for the next 30 days. Week 1. Foundation building. Choose one daily foundation practice from each category: mindfulness, physical movement, and conscious breathing. Commit to these 3 practices for just 5 minutes each, every day for the next 7 days. Don't add anything else yet. Focus entirely on building consistency with these basics. Week 2. Pattern recognition. While maintaining your daily practices, begin observing your personal anxiety patterns without trying to change them. Notice what triggers your worry, spirals, how your body responds to stress, and which situations you tend to avoid. Keep a simple notes app on your phone to record these observations. Week 3. Gentle exposure. Continue your daily practices and add one weekly challenge. Choose something small but meaningful that you've been avoiding due to anxiety. This might be making a phone call you've been putting off, attending a social event, or having a conversation you've been avoiding. Week 4. Integration and planning. Maintain all previous practices while conducting your first monthly assessment. Evaluate what's working, what needs adjustment, and what you want to focus on next. Create your personalized emergency protocol and identify resources for continued learning and growth. Your 30-day commitment contract. I want you to make a commitment to yourself right now, not a vague promise to try harder or worry less, but a specific, actionable commitment to implement these principles for the next 30 days, regardless of how you feel or what circumstances arise. Write this commitment down. For the next 30 days, I commit to practicing specific daily practices every day, engaging in specific weekly challenge each week, and implementing the principles in this book even when I don't feel like it, especially when I don't feel like it. Sign and date this commitment. Put it somewhere you'll see it every day. This isn't about perfection, it's about consistency and follow-through, even when motivation wanes. The ripple effect of your transformation. As you implement these principles and begin experiencing greater mental freedom, you'll discover that the benefits extend far beyond reduced anxiety. You'll become more decisive, more authentic in your relationships, more willing to pursue meaningful goals, and more resilient in the face of life's inevitable challenges. Your transformation will also impact everyone around you. Your family members will benefit from your increased presence and emotional stability. Your colleagues will notice your improved confidence and decision-making abilities. Your friends will be inspired by your willingness to face challenges and grow from them. This ripple effect is one of the most profound aspects of anxiety recovery. When you stop living in fear and start living from courage, you give others permission to do the same. You become a living example that change is possible, that anxiety doesn't have to be a life sentence, and that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary mental freedom. A personal message of encouragement. If you've made it this far in our journey together, you've already demonstrated something important. You have the commitment and motivation necessary to create lasting change in your life. Many people live their entire lives accepting anxiety as an unchangeable fact, never realizing that freedom is possible. You're different. You've invested time and energy in understanding the mechanics of anxiety and learning practical tools for transformation. You've shown up for yourself in a way that many people never do. But knowledge and tools aren't enough. The principles in this book will only transform your life if you apply them consistently over time. There will be days when you don't want to meditate, when you want to avoid challenges, when you'd rather return to familiar patterns of worry and avoidance. These are the most important days to practice these principles. Your commitment to growth during difficult times is what separates temporary improvement from lasting transformation. Remember David, standing on that mountain peak in Peru, fear no longer making his decisions for him. Remember Sarah, who stopped waking up at 3 a.m., consumed by imaginary disasters. Remember Lisa, who transformed from barely functional to confidently pursuing her dreams. These aren't extraordinary people with special advantages. They're ordinary individuals who applied these principles consistently until they became extraordinary in their mental freedom. The same transformation is available to you. Your journey to mental freedom begins now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Now, with whatever resources you have, wherever you are, exactly as you are. The anxious thoughts that have been your companions for so long don't have to be your masters any longer. The fears that have kept you small don't have to define your future. The worry that has robbed you of sleep and peace doesn't have to continue stealing your life. You have everything you need to begin this transformation. The wisdom is within you, the strength has always been there, and the tools are now in your hands. Take the first step today. Choose your daily practices. Make your commitment. Begin the journey that will lead you from anxiety to freedom, from fear to courage, from worry to peace. Your future self is waiting on the other side of your fears, and that future self is proud of you for having the courage to begin. The journey to mental freedom starts now. Take the first step.